"Sorry I'm late," she whispered, and the moment those words left her mouth, Lena Carter's left knee buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. At the head of the table, Damian Moretti set down his glass and watched her with the kind of silence that made grown men confess without being asked. She straightened, she smiled, and she lied to the most dangerous man in the city. If this story already has your heart, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The clock on the 43rd floor said 7:14 p.m. The meeting had started at 7. Lena Carter knew this because she had memorized every single detail of this evening, down to the minute, the dress she would wear, the folder she would carry, the exact words she would say when she entered the room. She had rehearsed the entrance 17 times in her apartment bathroom mirror. Chin up, shoulders back, smile that said confidence without arrogance, a handshake that was firm without desperation. She had planned everything. What she had not planned was collapsing in the stairwell on the 21st floor. She had not planned the way her left ankle folded beneath her weight, like it had simply decided it was done. She had not planned the 45 seconds she spent sitting on a cold concrete step, pressing the back of her hand against her mouth, so nobody in the floors above or below would hear the sound she almost made. And she had absolutely not planned the way she whispered to herself, alone in that stairwell, with her ankle screaming and her presentation folder pressed tight against her chest like a life raft. "Get up, Lena, and then quieter, please." She got up, because she always got up. That was the thing nobody understood about Lena Carter. The getting up was not the impressive part. The getting up happened automatically, almost mechanically, the way breathing happened, not from courage, but from necessity. She got up because there was no version of the night where she didn't. There were 247 families connected to the Whitfield Rehabilitation Foundation who needed this funding partnership. There were 89 injured workers who had not been able to return to their jobs. There were 34 children whose parents had not walked through their front doors in months because one workplace accident had stolen everything. Lena knew each name. She had memorized every file. She had sat across kitchen tables from wives whose husbands could not lift their own arms. She had held the hands of men who cried quietly so their children wouldn't hear them through the walls. So she stood up in that stairwell. She tested her weight on the ankle. She breathed through the pain, and she climbed 6 more floors. The private dining room on the 43rd floor of the Aldridge Tower was the kind of space that announced wealth before anyone inside it said a single word. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, but tonight held only 11. Crystal glassware, a silence so controlled it felt manufactured, like even the air in the room had been instructed to behave. Lena stepped through the door at 7:14 p.m. "Sorry I'm late," she whispered. The room turned, all 11 faces, every eye in the space moving toward her at once like a single organism responding to a disturbance. She felt the weight of it, the assessment that happened in the first 2 seconds of any room like this. The scan that tallied everything: her dress, her shoes, her age, the brand of her portfolio, the way she stood. The invisible spreadsheet these people ran in the first breath of meeting someone new. She had prepared for that spreadsheet. What she had not prepared for was the man at the end of the table. Damian Moretti. She had seen photographs, of course. Everyone had seen photographs of Damian Moretti. He was 41 years old. He appeared in the financial section of newspapers approximately twice a year, always with the same controlled expression, always flanked by lawyers or civic officials, always captioned with words like philanthropist and real estate magnate and community investor. He was lean and dark-haired, with eyes that in every photograph looked like they were performing patience. In person, those eyes were doing something else entirely. He was watching her, not with the quick assessing scan of the others, not with the polite transactional attention that said you have 90 seconds before I form a permanent opinion. Damian Moretti was watching her the way a person watches something they find genuinely curious, with the kind of stillness that took practice, that came from years of needing to notice things other people missed. Lena kept her chin up. She found her seat third from the left, as specified in the evening's itinerary, and she set her folder on the table with exactly the deliberate quietness she had rehearsed. A man to her right extended a hand. Marcus Belfield. Belfield Capital. Lena Carter, Whitfield Rehabilitation Foundation. His handshake lasted 2 beats longer than necessary. Quite young for this kind of pitch, she smiled. I get that a lot. Across the table, a woman in a gray blazer, Senator Anya Polcroft, whose name Lena had also memorized, leaned slightly toward the man beside her and said something behind her hand that Lena could not hear. The man nodded. They both looked briefly at Lena and then looked away. She had expected this. She had prepared for this too. What she had not prepared for was the way Damian Moretti set down his water glass very slowly and said, into the quiet of the room, with a voice that was not loud, but somehow silenced everything around it, Miss Carter. The room heard it. It was the way people responded to authority, not the performance of authority, but the genuine article. The room didn't go quiet because Damian spoke. The room went quiet because the room already knew, in the instinctive animal way that humans sense hierarchy, that when Damian Moretti addressed someone directly, the appropriate response from everyone else was to listen. Lena looked at him. How long have you been walking like that? The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. Lena knew this because she counted. 1. The heat that moved from her chest to her throat. 2. The sudden acute awareness of her left ankle and what it was doing and what it had been doing since she entered this room. 3. The slow, terrible realization that of every person in this space, the one person she had specifically, privately, desperately hoped would not notice was the one person who had. 4, she answered. I don't know what you mean. Damian Moretti looked at her for a moment without speaking. Your left foot, he said finally. You've been favoring it since you walked in. I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine. She held his gaze. She was very good at this, holding the gaze of men who expected her to look away. It was a skill she had developed over years of being underestimated, over years of sitting in rooms where people looked through her before they looked at her. I'm standing, she said. I'm here. That's enough. Something shifted in Damian's expression. Not sympathy, she would have resented sympathy. Not admiration either. Something quieter than both. Something she didn't have a name for immediately. He looked at her for one more breath. Then he picked up his water glass again, returned his attention to the papers in front of him, and said simply, Your presentation begins in 4 minutes. Miss Carter, I suggest you use them to sit down. Marcus Belfield cleared his throat. Senator Polcroft began a conversation with the man beside her. The room returned to its previous rhythms. Lena sat down. She placed her hands flat on her thighs, beneath the table, where nobody could see them. She breathed out. She felt the distant, burning throb of her ankle, and she noted it, and she filed it somewhere in the back of her mind, labeled later the same way she filed all the things she couldn't afford to feel in the middle of something that mattered. She was very good at later. She had been practicing later for the better part of 3 years. The presentation was supposed to last 15 minutes. Lena had timed it 22 times. She rose from her chair when the room's attention shifted to her, and she felt the ankle register her weight and send its protest directly up her spine, and she absorbed it and stood fully and opened her folder and began. She was not a natural public speaker in the technical sense. She was not the kind of person who commanded rooms through charisma or volume or theatrical pauses. What she was, and what she had learned to use, was specific. She was specific in a way that people who dealt in abstractions and projections and fiscal models were rarely prepared for. She didn't begin with statistics. She began with a name. Raymond Hollis was 47 years old, she said. He worked 31 years in structural pipe installation. He fell from a scaffold in March of last year. When he was discharged from the hospital, he received a folded piece of paper and a referral number. Nobody told him the referral had a 6-month waiting list. Nobody told him that the physical therapy his recovery required was going to cost $2,400 a month. Nobody told Raymond what to do when he got home and realized he couldn't lift the coffee pot off the kitchen counter. The room was quiet. His wife, Della, told me that the hardest part wasn't the injury. Lena continued. The hardest part was watching Raymond sit in his chair and apologize. Every morning, for 4 months, he apologized for not working. He apologized for the medical bills. He apologized for needing help with his shoes. She let that sit for exactly 2 beats. Raymond is back at work now, modified duty, but working. He sent me a photograph of himself and Della at their grandson's birthday party last month. He's holding the baby. She looked up from her folder. That's what the Whitfield Rehabilitation Foundation does. We don't fill out paperwork and hand people referral numbers. We sit at kitchen tables. We make phone calls at 7 in the morning when someone is scared. We find the physical therapists who will work on sliding scale payments, and we find the counselors, and we find the employers who will create modified positions, and we do not stop calling until someone picks up. She looked at Marcus Belfield. That is not a model built on charitable sentiment, Mr. Belfield. That is a model built on measurable outcomes. I have 247 active cases with documented reemployment rates, recovery benchmarks, and family stability indicators. I will show you every number. She turned to the woman in the gray blazer. Senator Polcroft, 3 years ago, your office commissioned a report on the workforce impact of unremediated workplace injuries in this state. The report concluded that early intervention cuts long-term disability costs by 61%. Every family in my program is that 61%. I am asking you to help me reach the other 39. Senator Polcroft straightened slightly. Lena turned finally to the end of the table. To Damian Moretti, she did not have a prepared line for him. She had researched everyone else in the room, their public records, their stated priorities, their known objections. She had not known until 3 days ago that Damian Moretti would be attending this meeting. She looked at him directly. I don't know what you're looking for tonight, she said. But I know why I'm here. I'm here because Raymond Hollis's grandson deserves to grow up knowing his grandfather. I'm here because that's worth whatever it cost me to get to this room. A beat, and I intend to stay until someone tells me yes. The applause that followed was modest and controlled. The way applause was in rooms like this, brief, measured, functioning more as punctuation than as expression. Marcus Belfield leaned back in his chair. Impressive, he said, in the tone of a man who used the word precisely because it committed to nothing. Though I'd want the actuarial breakdown of your recovery metrics before we discuss any figures. I have it. Lena opened the second section of her folder and slid the document across the table. 12 pages, formatted, sourced. Belfield raised an eyebrow. You came prepared. I always come prepared, Mr. Belfield. What I can't always control is the elevator. A small, surprised silence. Then, and she had not expected this, a sound from the end of the table. Not laughter exactly. Something quieter. She looked at Damian Moretti. He was looking at the table, but the corner of his mouth had shifted by perhaps 3 millimeters. She filed that too, under something she didn't label yet. The formal portion of the meeting ended at 8:40 p.m. The room dissolved into smaller conversations, executives migrating toward the bar. Senator Polcroft cornered by a man from the city planning office, Marcus Belfield, now holding Lisa's actuarial report and talking to a woman Lena didn't recognize. Lena stood near the window and felt, for the first time since she had entered this room, the full weight of the last 4 hours. Not just the ankle, everything. The shift she had worked that morning at the community clinic. The stack of funding applications she had finalized at 2 a.m. the night before. The conversation she'd had with her mother at noon, not a good conversation. Not the kind her mother was capable of having most days anymore, that had left Lena sitting on the kitchen floor for 6 minutes, before she found the will to stand up and keep moving. She pressed 2 fingers against the window glass. Cold. She focused on that, the cold of the glass and the city below it, and the way the lights moved in organized streams like the city didn't know, couldn't know, how hard it was to simply be in it sometimes. You climbed 27 floors. She turned. Damian Moretti was standing 4 feet away from her. He had moved with the particular silence of a man who had spent years learning not to announce himself. The east stairwell, he said. The main elevator bank has been out since this morning. Maintenance rerouted access through the east entrance. 27 floors. He looked at her with that same quiet directness. You didn't take the service elevator. The service elevator requires a staff key. The concierge would have given you one. I didn't know that. You didn't ask. She looked at him steadily. No, I didn't ask. Why not? She considered lying. She considered one of the smooth, prepared answers she kept filed, and ready the ones that were technically true without being the whole truth. I didn't want to inconvenience anyone. Or I didn't want to be late. Or the cleanest version, I managed. But there was something about Damian Moretti's manner of asking that made her prepared answers feel like wet cardboard, like they would dissolve under the weight of actual scrutiny and leave her holding nothing. Because asking for help at the door would have been the first thing anyone saw, she said. And I couldn't afford to be the woman who needed help before she even got into the room. Damian was quiet for a moment, and now he said, "Can you walk to the elevator without my noticing?" "Probably not," she admitted. but I'm going to try. Miss Carter. Something in his tone made her stop. Not in the way she stopped for authority. She'd spent years refusing to respond to men who used their voices like leverage. It was something else. A quality in the way he said her name that was not commanding. That was, against every expectation she had brought into this room tonight, almost careful. You spent 14 minutes telling a room full of people that asking for help is not weakness, he said. You told the story of a man who learned that. You told it with conviction. You made Senator Polcroft's press secretary cry into her water glass. A beat, and then you climbed 27 floors rather than ask a concierge for a key. Lena felt the truth of that land somewhere below her ribs. She didn't answer. Damien looked at her for a moment longer. The foundation you presented tonight, he said. The rehabilitation model. Walk me through how the funding partnership would actually work. Not the summary, the mechanism. She stared at him. Now, you said you intended to stay until someone told you yes. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'm aware of the time. She held his gaze for a full 3 seconds. Then she pulled out her chair. And she sat down. And for the next 40 minutes, in a room that had mostly emptied, with the city spread out below them, and her ankle burning steadily, and her folder open between them, Lena Carter explained not performed, not pitched, not managed. She explained the actual granular, daily work of what she did. The calls made at midnight, the employers who required 3 follow-up visits before they agreed to modified duty arrangements, the way families fell apart quietly, in increments when the person who held them together stopped being able to function, the indicators she had learned to watch for. The moments when a case turned. Damien Morady listened. He did not interrupt. He did not look at his phone. He asked 4 questions. All 4 went to the structural center of what she had said. All 4 demonstrated that he had heard, not just the words but the architecture of the information beneath them. At 9:38 p.m., he closed the folder he had been reading. The Castellano Community Program, he said. 2019. You've heard of it? She had not. It was a workforce rehabilitation initiative, he said. 12 million in funding, modeled on an approach similar to what you described tonight. He paused. I built it. Lena went still. I spent 8 months working on that program. Damien continued, his voice remaining even, almost neutral, but beneath the neutral, she heard something she recognized. Because she heard it in her own voice sometimes when she talked about the cases that had not gone the way she needed them to. 8 months building something I believed in. I had the right people, the right model. I thought I had the right partners. He stopped. What happened? She asked. He looked at her. Someone I trusted decided that $12 million was worth more than the people it was meant to help. He said it without drama, which somehow made it worse. Funds were redirected. Contracts were falsified. By the time I discovered what had happened, the program was 3 months into operation and already hollowed out. The families enrolled in the first cycle never received what they'd been promised. Lena sat with that for a moment. How many families? She asked. 63. She closed her eyes, briefly, one breath. I know some of those names, she said. Damien looked at her sharply. 3 families from the Castellano program came through Whitfield, she said quietly. In 2021, Marcus Denning, Caroline Brecht, and a man named Ellis Torres, who had a daughter in middle school. She opened her eyes and looked at Damien directly. Ellis Torres is one of my 247. The silence that followed was different from the silences that had come before it. Damien set both hands flat on the table. He looked at the folder between them. And then he said, very quietly, something that Lena would spend the drive home, turning over, in her mind like a stone, she couldn't stop feeling the weight of. You know, I had stopped believing that what I built then was worth building again. He looked up at her, and then you walked into this room on a broken ankle and told Bellfield's actuarial team that you intended to stay until someone said yes. Lena didn't know what to say to that, so she said the thing she had learned to say, in the moments when honesty was the only thing left. I don't know if the ankle's broken, she said. I was hoping it was just a bad sprain. Damien looked at her, and then quietly, unexpectedly, in a way that changed the temperature of the entire room, he almost smiled. It's been 4 hours, he said. You need to get it looked at. After the meeting. The meeting ended an hour ago. After I'm done then. Miss Carter. And there was that careful quality again, in the way he said her name. When are you ever done? She didn't have an answer for that either. Because the truth, the whole, unguarded truth that she kept filed under later, with everything else she couldn't afford to feel, was that she didn't know. She genuinely didn't know. And sitting in that emptied room, with the city below and the folder open between them and the pain in her ankle, finally starting to say the things she had been refusing to let it say all night, Lena Carter felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not safe, not rescued, something smaller and more specific than that. She felt seen, and she did not know yet whether that was the beginning of something. Or whether a man like Damian Moretti, the kind of man who built $12 million programs and lost them, who watched a room the way other people watched a chessboard, who noticed a woman favoring her left ankle from across 40 feet, whether a man like that was safe to be seen by. She gathered her folder. She stood. She tested her weight. "Thank you," she said, "for listening." "Thank you," Damian said, "for not lying to me about why you were late." She looked at him. "I did lie," she said. "I told you I was fine." "No." He stood as well, the movement unhurried and complete. "You said sorry I'm late. That wasn't a lie, a beat. That was the only honest thing you said when you walked in." Lena took a breath. "Good night, Mr. Moretti. Get the ankle looked at, Miss Carter." She walked toward the door. She did not let herself limp. But she knew, with the certainty of a woman who had spent 4 hours being watched by a man who missed nothing, that he was watching her walk out. And she knew that he noticed every step it cost her. And she knew that he let her take every single one of them herself. Because some people, when they see you struggling, grab your arm. And some people stand close enough that you know you won't fall alone. Lena Carter stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself lean against the wall. Just for a moment, just until the doors opened again. The ankle was not broken. It was, according to the exhausted urgent care physician who saw Lena at 11:20 p.m. that night, a grade 2 sprain with soft tissue damage that required rest, elevation, and approximately 0 of the things Lena Carter's life allowed for. Avoid weight-bearing activity for at least 72 hours, the doctor said, writing on her chart without looking up. "I have a site visit Thursday morning." He looked up then. "Miss Carter, I'm going to use small words. If you walk on this without support for the next 3 days, you will turn a sprain into a tear. A tear means surgery. Surgery means 6 to 8 weeks off your feet entirely." He clicked his pen. "Which would you prefer?" She drove home with a compression bandage and a prescription she didn't fill, and the particular silence of a person who has used up every last reserve of composed behavior and has nothing left to perform for. She sat in her car in the parking garage of her building for 11 minutes before she got out. Inside her apartment, her phone had 17 unread messages. 3 were from her mother's overnight aide, reporting that her mother had refused dinner again and had called Lena's name for 2 hours before finally sleeping. 4 were from Marcus Belfield's assistant, requesting the full actuarial breakdown in a specific format by Friday. 1 was from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't open it. She opened it. "Your presentation was the most honest thing I've heard in this building in 4 years. The Castellano families deserve better than what happened to them. So do yours." DM Lena. Read it twice. She set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. She stood there in her quiet apartment, with her ankle wrapped and her folder still clutched against her chest, and she thought about a man who had built something he believed in and watched someone hollow it out from the inside. She thought about Ellis Torres, who used to sit across her kitchen table with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug and apologize for taking up her time. She thought about what Damian Moretti had said. "I had stopped believing that what I built then was worth building again." She picked up the phone. She typed, "The Castellano families got back up." That's because someone built something worth building. Even if someone else broke it, she hit send before she could think about it too carefully. The response came back in 40 seconds. "Get some sleep, Miss Carter." She almost smiled. She went to bed. She did not sleep for 2 hours. The next morning arrived the way mornings always arrived for Lena, not gently, not with the slow accumulation of consciousness that other people described, but all at once, like a door kicked open. Her alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., and she was already awake and already thinking about the Belfield format request and her mother's aid and the site visit Thursday and the 11 other things that needed her attention before 9 o'clock. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her ankle introduced itself immediately and thoroughly. She breathed through it. "Okay," she said to the empty room. "Okay." She got up. By 7:30, she was at the foundation's main office, a converted two-room space in a building that had been donated by a retired contractor named George Falwell, who had taken a personal interest in the program after his son-in-law went through it. The office smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner, and the particular organized chaos of people who were doing too much with too little. Filing cabinets along one wall, a folding table that functioned as a conference room, two second-hand desks, a printer that was held together by a combination of tape and collective optimism. Her case manager, Dara Okafor, was already there when Lena arrived. Dara was 31 and had a master's degree in social work, and approximately zero patience for inefficiency, and approximately infinite patience for the human beings in their caseload. She was the best hire Lena had ever made, and she knew it, and Lena knew it, and neither of them discussed it, because there was always something more pressing to discuss. "How'd it go?" Dara said, not looking up from her screen. "Belfield wants the actuarial breakdown by Friday." "That's not what I asked. It went well enough that Belfield wants the actuarial breakdown by Friday." Dara looked up. She looked at Lena's ankle. She looked at the compression bandage visible above Lena's shoe. She looked at Lena's face. "What happened?" "I fell in the stairwell." "Lena, it's a sprain. I'm fine." Dara stared at her for a full 3 seconds with the expression of a woman's several pieces of information into a picture she did not entirely like. "Damien Moretti was at that meeting," Dara said. "He was. And what? And was he everything the newspapers make him sound like?" Lena considered this seriously for a moment. "No," she said. "He was something else entirely." Dara watched her face with the precision of someone who had spent years reading between the lines of what people said versus what they meant. "Okay," Dara said carefully. "He asked about the Castellano program." The change in Dara's expression was immediate. "He built that program." "I know. 3 of our clients came from that collapse." "I know that too. Did you tell him?" "I told him about Ellis Torres." Dara sat back in her chair. She processed this the way she processed information completely, without rushing, turning it over until she understood what it actually meant, and not just what it sounded like on the surface. "What did he say?" "Not much." Lena pulled out her chair and sat down and opened her laptop and tried to look like someone whose mind was entirely on the actuarial breakdown format. "He listened, that's all." Dara said nothing for a moment. "Lena, I'm working. Damien Moretti doesn't go to foundation pitch meetings." "He was there. His name wasn't on the guest list we received." Lena stopped typing. She hadn't known that. She turned slowly to look at Dara. "How do you know?" Dara pulled up something on her screen and turned the monitor so Lena could see it. The guest list confirmation they'd received 3 weeks ago from the Aldridge Tower event coordinator. 11 names. Damien Moretti was not among them. His name was added 48 hours before the meeting, Dara said. "I only know because I checked the seating assignment when the revised itinerary came in, and his name was in the slot originally listed as Reginald Cross, who is Belfield Capital's lead investment director, by the way." Reginald Cross did not attend. Lena stared at the screen. "Damien Moretti took someone else's seat," she said. "Specifically, the seat of the person most likely to control the funding decision." The office was very quiet for a moment. "Why would he do that?" Lena said. Though even as she asked it, pieces were beginning to move in the back of her mind. Pieces she didn't have enough information to assemble yet, but could feel the weight of. "I don't know," Dara said. "But I think you should." The answer, or the beginning of one, arrived at 2:15 p.m. in the form of a phone call from a number she now recognized. She answered on the second ring. "Moretti, how's the ankle? Functional." "That's not the same as better." "No," she agreed, "it's not." She picked up a pen and set it down. "You weren't on the original guest list for last night." A pause, not a long one, but a pause. "No," he said. "I wasn't. You took Reginald Cross's seat." "Why?" Another pause, this one longer. When Damien spoke again, his voice carried something measured, like a man choosing his words with the same precision he applied to everything else. "Because 6 weeks ago I received an anonymous tip," he said, "that someone connected to the Aldridge Funds Circle was planning to make a move against a small rehabilitation foundation in the 4th District. That the pitch meeting was being set up not as a genuine funding opportunity, but as a way to get the foundation's director in a room with specific people, for reasons that had nothing to do with charitable investment." Lena's hand went still. "What kind of reasons?" "The kind that require a face-to-face meeting to make an offer that can't be made in writing." "What offer?" "I don't know yet," he paused, "but I went to that meeting to find out." And to make sure that whatever the offer was, you weren't in that room alone when it was made. The silence stretched between them across the phone line. Lena sat very still. She was not a person who frightened easily. She had learned early that fear was expensive, that it cost time and energy and clarity, and that the most effective thing to do with fear was to place it directly beside the thing that mattered more, and let the two of them compete. In her experience, the thing that mattered more usually won. But what Damien had just said was not the kind of information that fear competed with easily. "Who sent the anonymous tip?" she said. "I don't know yet. But you believed it enough to take Cross's seat." "I believed it enough to be there." He paused. "I've learned, Miss Carter, that the people who send anonymous tips in my world don't do it for fun. They do it because they know something they can't say out loud. Which means whatever is coming for your foundation is real." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "Belfield," she said. "His assistant contacted me this morning. The actuarial format request is legitimate," Damien said. "Belfield is exactly what he appears to be. He's not the problem. Then who is? That's what I'm trying to find out." She pressed her thumb and forefinger against the bridge of her nose. She breathed. She thought about 247 families. She thought about the folders in her filing cabinet with names and addresses and children's ages and recovery timelines. She thought about the fact that someone, somewhere, had looked at all of that and decided it was an obstacle rather than a mission. "What do you need from me?" she said. She felt more than heard the slight shift in his manner. "Nothing right now," he said. "I need you to go about your work normally. Don't change anything. Don't make calls you wouldn't normally make. And don't," he stopped. "Don't what? Don't tell anyone about this conversation." She understood why. She didn't like it, but she understood it. "Mr. Moretti," she chose her words the same way he chose his. "I need you to understand something. Whatever is happening, whatever someone is trying to do to this foundation, I have 247 active cases. I have families who depend on continuity. If something threatens the program, nothing will threaten the program," he said. "You can't promise that." "No," he agreed. "I can't." And she heard something in that acknowledgement that was more honest than a reassurance would have been. "But I can promise you that you are not alone in this room." She remembered saying that the night before, in a room full of investors and executives, explaining the model of her program. "We do not stop calling until someone picks up." She hadn't expected it to come back to her like this. "Okay," she said. "Go home and rest your ankle. I have 4 client calls this afternoon. Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti." She could have sworn she heard that almost smile again. The 3-millimeter shift in the corner of his mouth translated somehow into the quality of a silence on a phone line. "Fine," he said. 4 calls, then the ankle." "Yes, sir." She hung up. She sat for a long moment. Then she pulled out a fresh legal pad and wrote one word at the top, "Who?" and she underlined it 3 times. The first answer came from a direction she didn't expect. It came from her mother. Margaret Carter was 67 years old and had been diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia 14 months ago. Her world had contracted significantly since then. The apartment they shared, the window she liked to sit near, the photographs arranged on the shelf beside the television, the particular rhythm of certain days when she was clear and present and fully herself. Lena visited every evening. On the evenings when her mother was clear, they talked. Not about the dementia, not about the future, not about the things Lena had learned to stop trying to discuss, because they caused a particular kind of grief that neither of them could do anything with. They talked about other things. The neighbors, the television programs her mother liked, the family stories her mother had always been the keeper of. That Thursday evening, her mother was clear. Lena came in and found her sitting upright in her chair with the particular bright-eyed alertness that meant she had spent the day somewhere in her own past and had come back from it with something she wanted to say. "Victor Hale called the building," her mother said. Lena went still. She set her bag down very carefully. "When?" "This morning. Early. He called the main line." Her mother watched her face with the perceptive focus that the dementia had not yet touched her. Mother had always been able to read Lena the way Lena read case files. Thoroughly. Without looking away, he asked the building manager which unit we were in. "He said he was an old colleague of yours." "He is not an old colleague of mine," Lena said. "That's what I thought." Her mother reached into the pocket of her cardigan and produced a folded piece of paper. "The building manager brought this up. He said the gentleman left it." Lena unfolded it. It was a business card with a handwritten note on the back. Miss Carter, I think you and I should speak before you sign anything with the Aldridge Group. I have information that directly concerns your foundation. VH Lena looked at the card. Victor Hale, CEO, Hale Development Group. She knew the name. She knew it the same way she knew most names in her city's civic and business landscape, from the news, from grant applications, from the overlapping circles of people who dealt in buildings and land and the infrastructure of things. Victor Hale was a developer. He built things: commercial properties, mixed-use developments, the kinds of projects that required city permits and community board approvals, and the particular art of navigating municipal relationships. She had never had direct dealings with him. She could not imagine why he would want to speak with her. But she could feel, with the instinct she had developed over years of sitting across tables from people who wanted something from her clients, that this card was not an offer. It was a warning, or something dressed as one. Mom. She refolded the card. Did he say anything else? He said to tell you it was time sensitive. Her mother looked at her with steady eyes. Lena, who is this person? I don't know yet, but he concerns you. A little, more than a little. Her mother reached out and touched her hand. It was a small gesture, simple, the kind of gesture that still, after everything, had the ability to reach right through all of Lena's careful composure and find the part of her that was just a daughter, just a person who was tired, just a woman who needed someone to know that she was carrying something heavy. I'm fine, Lena said. Her mother looked at her. You say that the way your father used to say it, she said quietly. Right before he wasn't. Lena didn't answer. Her mother squeezed her hand once and let go. Be careful, she said. That's all I'm asking. Lena sat in her car outside her mother's building and looked at the business card and thought about who she could call. The list was shorter than it should have been. Dara. But Dara had 2 small children and a caseload of her own, and Lena had already pulled her into enough of this. Her attorney, James Wu, but James handled nonprofit compliance. Not the kind of situation this was beginning to feel like. She sat with the card in her hand and the city moving around her, and she thought about the phone call that afternoon. About a man who had asked for nothing except that she continue normally and trust that she was not alone in this room. She typed, Victor Hale left a card at my mother's building this morning. He says he has information about the foundation and that it's time sensitive. He wants to meet. She sent it. The reply came back in 4 minutes. Do not meet with him, not yet. I need 24 hours. She typed, why? Because Victor Hale is not trying to warn you. He's trying to find out how much you know. She stared at that sentence for a long time. How much I know about what? About the property. She typed back immediately. What property? There was a longer pause this time, long enough that she began to wonder if she had crossed some line she hadn't seen, asked something that moved this conversation from information sharing into territory he hadn't decided to open yet. Then there is a parcel in the Whitmore district, a community center property that has been in a trust for 11 years. The trust expires in 4 months. When it does, the property either reverts to its original deed conditions, which include a mandate for community benefit use, or it gets absorbed into the municipal redevelopment pool. She read it twice. Hale wants that property, she typed. Hale has wanted that property for 3 years. He's been waiting out the trust. What does that have to do with my foundation? The pause this time was brief. Because the community benefit clause on the deed can only be invoked by a qualifying nonprofit with an established community service record. If a qualifying nonprofit files a claim before the trust expires, the property goes to them for community use at a nominal lease. Lena's hand was perfectly still on the phone, and my foundation qualifies, she typed. You're one of 4 organizations in the city that would. Did I know that? No. But Hale knew. Hale's attorneys identified your foundation 14 months ago as the most viable claimant. A pause. That's why the Aldridge meeting was arranged the way it was. Not to fund you, to get you in a room, to make you an offer to walk away from the Whitmore claim before you even knew you had one. Lena read the message. She read it again. She put the phone down on the passenger seat and looked through the windshield at the quiet street and felt the specific sensation of a picture assembling itself, piece by piece, each one arriving not as a surprise exactly, but as a confirmation of something her instincts had been circling without words for 2 days. She picked the phone back up. You knew all of this when you came to the meeting. I suspected most of it. I confirmed more of it today. Why didn't you tell me last night? The pause that followed was longer than any of the others. When his response came, it was 4 words: "You had enough to carry." Lena sat in the car. The city moved outside the windows. A woman walked past with a dog. 2 teenagers crossed the street arguing about something neither of them would remember in a week. A delivery driver double-parked across the intersection, and someone behind him laid on the horn. The ordinary, indifferent machinery of the city, continuing. She breathed. She thought about a man who had built a $12 million program for families who needed it and watched someone destroy it from the inside. Who had spent years, presumably, with the particular specific weight of that failure. Who had received an anonymous tip 6 weeks ago about a foundation being set up, and had taken a stranger's seat at a table and said nothing about any of it, while listening to a 26-year-old woman with a sprained ankle tell the room. About Raymond Hollis and his grandson's birthday party. Who had let her walk out on her own 2 feet. "Thank you," she typed, "for carrying some of it. Even when I didn't know you were." The response came back almost immediately, which surprised her. Ellis Torres's daughter. "How old is she now?" She blinked at the screen. 14, she typed. "Her name is Maya. She wants to be an engineer." A pause. "Good," he said, 1 word, but she understood everything inside it. She started the car and drove home through a city that was suddenly quietly different from the one she'd been navigating alone. Not safer, not simpler, but different in the way a room changes when someone else is in it. Even when neither of you says a word. The 24 hours Damien asked for passed the way bad weather passed, slowly, with pressure. Lena did not contact Victor Hale. She went to work. She made her calls. She sat across the kitchen table from a woman named Patricia Osei, whose husband had lost 3 fingers in a factory press and was now refusing physical therapy because he was convinced the insurance company would use his compliance against him in the settlement hearing. Lena spent 2 hours with Patricia, going through every document, explaining exactly what the insurance company could and could not argue, until the fear in Patricia's face became something smaller and more manageable. Until she could see Patricia breathe. That was the work. That was always the work, and Lena did it the way she always did, completely, without letting the thing moving in the background of her mind bleed into the foreground of someone else's crisis. But when she got home that night and sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her legal pad, she wrote the word Whitmore at the top of a fresh page and started building what she knew, the community center property in the Whitmore district. A trust 11 years old, 4 months until expiration. A clause that said community benefit use. A developer who had been waiting, patiently and deliberately, for the clock to run out. And her foundation, her underfunded, 2-room office, Tape and Optimism Foundation, sitting on a claim she hadn't known existed. She wrote a second word beneath the first, why her, not why her foundation. She understood that part now, the qualifying criteria, the established service record, the specifics of the deed language. She meant something different. Why had someone sent Damien Moretti an anonymous tip about a move against her foundation specifically? Of the 4 organizations that could invoke the community benefit clause, why was Whitfield the one someone wanted protected? And who, in a city full of people with competing interests and layered agendas, had decided that Damien Moretti was the person to call? She circled the word. She did not have an answer. She went to bed at midnight and stared at the ceiling and thought about a man who had said, "You had enough to carry," with the same quiet directness he applied to everything else. And she thought about how long it had been since anyone had looked at the weight she carried and named it without being asked. She thought about that for longer than she intended to. Then she made herself stop. The call from Damien came at 7:48 a.m. "I found the source of the tip," he said, without preamble, without good morning. She had already learned that this was simply how he operated. Information moved from him to you the moment it was ready, without the social scaffolding most people erected around difficult conversations. She appreciated it more than she expected to. "Who?" she said. "A woman named Claire Saunderson. She was a paralegal at Hale Development Group until 8 months ago." A pause. She was terminated after she raised internal concerns about the Whitmore acquisition strategy, specifically about certain documentation she believed had been manipulated. What documentation? The trust records. Another pause, measured. "Lena, the trust that governs the Whitmore property, it was amended 14 months ago. A clause was added that introduced a notification requirement. Any qualifying nonprofit attempting to invoke the Community Benefit Clause is required to submit written notice of intent to the trust administrator at least 90 days before expiration. Okay, she said slowly. That sounds straightforward. It would be. Except the amendment was filed quietly, without the standard public notice period. Which means most of the organizations that would have been eligible to file that intent notice don't know the 90-day window exists. He stopped. The trust expires in 116 days. She counted. That gives me 26 days to file the notice, she said. Yes, and if I don't file within that window, the Community Benefit Clause cannot be invoked. The property goes into the Municipal Redevelopment Pool, and Hale's bid, which has been pre-positioned for 3 years, moves to the front of the line. The kitchen was very quiet. He manufactured the deadline, she said. His attorneys drafted the amendment, yes, and Claire Saunderson found out. She found out. She raised it internally. She was let go within 2 weeks with a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement. Another pause. The settlement included a clause prohibiting her from contacting any of the organizations on the qualifying nonprofit list. But it didn't prohibit her from contacting you. It didn't prohibit her from contacting someone who knew how to get information to the right place. The particular quality of that sentence, the layers folded inside it, the world it implied reminded her, quietly and unmistakably, of who she was talking to. She was careful, but she was also angry, and people who are angry enough find a way. Lena stood at her kitchen counter and looked at the legal pad on the table, at the word Whitmore and the circled "Why her" beneath it. Damien. First time she'd used his first name, it came out before she made a decision about it. The amendment to the trust, is it legal? A pause. It was filed correctly, he said. The process was followed. The amendment itself is not illegal. He stopped. But the intent behind it, the deliberate filing without adequate public notice, specifically timed to eliminate competition, that's a different conversation. One that can be had, but not quickly. How quickly can I file the notice of intent? Your attorney would need to prepare the documentation. James Wu handles your nonprofit compliance. She paused. You know my attorney's name. I know a great deal about your foundation, Miss Carter. I've had 6 weeks to learn. She didn't know whether to be unsettled by that or not. She filed it under the growing category of things about Damien Moretti that defied the simple responses she kept reaching for. Can you recommend someone to work with James? She said. Someone who knows this kind of trust law, specifically. I already called someone this morning. A pause. She's expecting to hear from you before noon. Her name is Ruth Adler. She spent 20 years in municipal property law before going private. She's the person who should have been consulted when the trust amendment was filed and wasn't, which she is personally offended by, which means she will work twice as hard on this. Lena almost laughed. It came out of her unexpectedly, a short, genuine sound that surprised her more than it surprised him. You anticipated that I would ask, she said. I anticipated that you would move the moment you had information to move on. Is that a criticism? It's an observation. And she could hear clearly now that the almost smile was present. It's also why your foundation has 247 active cases, when most programs your size have 40. She sat down. Thank you, she said, and she meant it without armor, which was not something she did easily or often. Call Ruth before noon, he said, and Lena, she noticed he used her first name. She suspected he had noticed the same, a moment before. Yes, she said, Hale knows the clock is running. He will move in the next few days. His next step is likely to be a direct approach, not the building manager this time. He'll want a meeting, and if he requests one, accept it. He paused. But not alone. Victor Hale requested the meeting at 11:15 a.m. the same day, through a formal email to the Foundation's general inbox, copied to 3 of his attorneys. He was not a man who did things informally once he decided to move. Lena read the email twice. Then she forwarded it to Damien and called Ruth Adler and spent 45 minutes on the phone with a woman who spoke in rapid, precise sentences and whose personal offense at the trust amendment was, as Damien had promised, functioning as an extremely high-grade fuel source. 26 days is tight but workable, Ruth said. I need your foundation's full compliance documentation, your community service records for the last 3 years, and your most recent audit. Can you have those to me by end of day? By 3 o'clock, Lena said. Good. A pause. Miss Carter, the Community Benefit Clause is genuine. Your foundation's eligibility is genuine. What Hale did with that amendment was technically legal and deeply cynical, and I intend to use every legitimate tool available to make sure it does not accomplish what it was designed to accomplish. I appreciate that. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 26 days. Lena liked her immediately. She pulled the compliance files and spent the next 2 hours assembling documentation with Dara, who asked no questions about why they were sending 3 years of service records to a property attorney on an urgent basis, because Dara was the kind of person who understood when to move and when to ask. At 2:47 p.m. she sent the files to Ruth Adler. At 3:15 p.m. she replied to Victor Hale's email. Mr. Hale, I'm available to meet Thursday at 2 p.m. at our foundation offices. Please confirm. She did not wait long. His response arrived at 3:22 p.m. Thursday at 2 p.m. works well. I look forward to a productive conversation, Miss Carter. She stared at the words productive conversation and felt the particular chill of language that was designed to sound reasonable while meaning something else entirely. She forwarded it to Damien. His reply came back in 6 minutes. I'll be there. Dara found out about the meeting on Wednesday morning, which was inevitable, because Dara found out about everything eventually and had the professional courtesy to wait until she had confirmed her information before discussing it. She appeared in the doorway of Lena's office with a coffee mug and the expression of a woman who had several things to say and was organizing them in real time. Damien Moretti is coming to the Victor Hale meeting, she said. Yes, as what? Your legal representation, as someone who is aware of the situation. Lena Dara stepped fully into the office. I've been running background on both of these men all week because you've been in a situation you haven't fully explained to me, and I trust you, but I also work here. She set the coffee mug down on the desk with the gentle deliberateness of someone placing a period at the end of a sentence. Victor Hale is not just a developer. He sits on the Municipal Infrastructure Advisory Board. He has 3 city council members who attend his fundraisers. He has been the named respondent in 2 community displacement lawsuits in the last 4 years, both of which were settled before trial. She paused. And Damien Moretti is. I know what Damien Moretti is. Do you? The question landed differently than Dara intended it to, or maybe exactly as she intended it to. Lena held her case manager's gaze. He built the Castigliano program, Lena said. He also dismantled 4 businesses and a waterfront property consortium when someone crossed him 3 years ago. Dara's voice was steady and careful. Not illegally, but thoroughly. There were people who woke up one morning and discovered that every professional relationship they had maintained for a decade had quietly declined to continue. She paused. I'm not saying he was wrong to do it. I'm saying that is the version of Damien Moretti that exists alongside the one who listened to your presentation and texted you at 11 o'clock at night. Lena was quiet for a moment. I know, she said, and I think he's both of those things at once. And I think she stopped. She looked at her desk. I think I need to be careful about which version I'm relying on. Dara watched her face for a moment longer. Okay, she said softly. That's a careful answer. It's the only honest one I have. Dara picked up her coffee mug. For what it's worth, she said, the 4 businesses he dismantled. 2 of them had been defrauding their employees on benefits for years. The Waterfront Consortium had blocked low-income housing permits in 3 districts. She paused at the doorway. I'm not saying trust him. I'm saying the things he goes after tend to be things that deserve to be gone after. She left. Lena sat alone. She thought about a man who had said protection without respect was just another cage, except he hadn't said that yet. That was still coming. That was still a sentence waiting in the future of the story. What he had said was simpler and in some ways more difficult. You are not alone in this room. She picked up her pen. She went back to work. Thursday arrived the way consequential days always arrived, indistinguishable from any other until it wasn't. Victor Hale was not what she'd pictured. She had built an image from the name and the business card, and Dara's research, and the cold precision of his email. She had expected someone polished in the corporate sense, the kind of smooth that was practiced and maintained. What walked through the foundation's door at 2:03 p.m. was a man in his early 50s, trim, silver-haired, wearing a suit that was expensive without being aggressive about it. He had a warm handshake. He smiled at Dara. He looked around the office, the filing cabinets, the folding table, the printer, with an expression of what appeared to be genuine respect. He was very good. She gave him that immediately and completely. Miss Carter. His handshake was firm and brief. Thank you for making time. Of course. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please sit down." He sat. He declined coffee. He placed his hands on his knees and looked at her with the particular attentive quality of a man performing interest with considerable skill. "I'll be direct," he said. "I've followed the Whitfield Foundation's work for some time. What you've built here is genuinely impressive, especially given your resource constraints. That's not flattery. I've read your outcome reports." "Thank you," she said. "I'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity." He paused. Hale Development has a community investment program. We work with established nonprofits in districts where we're developing, specifically to ensure that community services are maintained and expanded as neighborhoods change. Think Whitfield would be an excellent fit. She looked at him. "What kind of partnership?" she said. "Operational funding. A 3-year commitment. Enough to double your current caseload capacity, hire 2 additional case managers, and expand into 2 additional districts." He named a figure that was real. That was more than real. That was the kind of number that would change everything she was trying to do. She did not let it move her face. "That's a significant commitment," she said. "It's a significant organization," he smiled. "We'd ask for very little in return. Standard reporting requirements, co-branding on program materials, and one small thing." There it was. The one small thing. She waited. "We'd ask that the foundation not pursue any property claims in the Whitmore district during the term of the partnership agreement." She held his gaze without difficulty. "Why would the foundation be pursuing property claims in the Whitmore district?" she said. Something shifted very slightly behind his eyes. Not alarm. He was too controlled for alarm. But an adjustment. A recalibration. "It's simply a standard non-competition clause for districts where we have active developments," he said smoothly. "Nothing specific to your organization." "Of course," she said. The door behind Victor Hale opened. He turned. Damien Moretti walked in. The quality of Victor Hale's stillness in that moment was something Lena would think about for a long time afterward. It was not the stillness of surprise exactly. It was the stillness of a man who had prepared for several contingencies and was now rapidly sorting through them, identifying which one he was in. Damien pulled the second chair to the side of Lena's desk, not across from Hale, beside her, and sat down without being invited, without looking at Hale yet, and said to Lena, "Sorry, I'm late." She recognized the echo. She suspected he intended it. "You're right on time," she said. Then Damien looked at Victor Hale. "Victor," he said. The tone was level, completely without hostility, which somehow made it more unsettling than hostility would have been. "I heard you were making the rounds." Hale recovered well. "Damien, I didn't realize you had an interest in the Whitfield Foundation." "I have an interest in a lot of things." Damien glanced at Lena. "Miss Carter was walking me through your proposal. 3-year operational funding, non-competition clause for the Whitmore district." He returned his gaze to Hale. "Generous offer. It's a fair partnership," Hale said. "It's a specific partnership," Damien said. "Specifically structured to ensure that the one organization in this city most likely to successfully invoke the Community Benefit Clause on the Whitmore property doesn't file the intent notice in the next 26 days. The silence in that room was absolute. Lena watched Victor Hale's face make a series of small, controlled adjustments that added up to the expression of a man deciding, in real time, which version of this conversation was still available to him. "I'm not sure what you think you know," Hale said carefully. "I know about Claire Saunderson," Damien said. "I know about the trust amendment. I know about the non-disclosure clause in her settlement." He paused. "And I know that the reason you need Lena Carter to stay out of Whitmore is that her foundation is the only one that could file in time and make it stick." Hale looked at Lena. "You should think carefully about who you're letting into your corner, Miss Carter," he said. "Damien Moretti's involvement in anything comes with consequences that go well beyond what you're prepared to manage." "I'm familiar with consequences, Mr. Hale," she said. "I manage them every day." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked back at Damien. "The amendment is legal," he said. "It is," Damien agreed, "and the intent notice Lena files will also be legal. And the story that Claire Saunderson is willing to tell about how that amendment came to be, the internal memos, the conversations she documented, the timeline of her termination, that will also be entirely legal to share with the Municipal Review Board, the 3 journalists who cover city property development, and the 2 city council members who are not at your fundraisers." He paused. "The legality of all of it is not actually what I'm suggesting is the issue." A long silence. "What is the issue?" Hill said. The issue, Damien said, is that you looked at 247 families and calculated that their program was a more useful tool than a destination. His voice remained even. That is the issue. Victor Hale stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Lena with an expression that was professional and measured and contained. Underneath all of that, something that was not quite a threat and not quite a warning but lived in the neighborhood of both. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said to her. "I always do," she said. He left. The door closed. The room was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then Lena exhaled a single long, controlled breath and put both hands flat on her desk and said, "He's going to come back harder." "Yes," Damien said. "What does that look like?" "It depends on how much he thinks he can still control." He paused. "He'll move through official channels first. Possibly a challenge to your compliance documentation. Maybe a complaint to the nonprofit regulatory office that triggers an audit. An audit would take weeks." "Yes," she looked at him. "During which I couldn't file the intent notice." "An audit doesn't legally prevent the filing. But it creates enough noise and distraction and resource drain that a small organization with limited legal staff might not be able to manage both simultaneously." He met her eyes. "Which is why Ruth Adler is handling the filing, and James Wu is handling everything else, and why both of them are being paid from resources that are not coming from your operating budget." She went still. "What? I should have mentioned that earlier." He said it simply, without drama, the way a person mentions they picked up coffee for someone. "I covered Ruth's retainer. James's time for the next 30 days is also covered." Lena looked at him. She felt something move through her chest that was complicated and specific, and she did not know immediately what to do with it. "You should have asked me first," she said. "You would have said no." "Yes, which is why I didn't ask." She sat with that for a moment. The precision of it, the way it was simultaneously presumptuous and completely correct. "I don't want to owe you," she said. "You don't," he said. "This is not a transaction." He paused. "The Castellano families who ended up in your program, you spent years helping people that I failed. If you want to keep a ledger, that's what goes on it." She looked at him for a long time, the man who had sat at the end of a table 4 days ago and watched her walk across a room, who had asked how long she'd been walking like that, who had listened to 40 minutes of foundation mechanics in an emptied dining room and asked, at the end of it, how much she knew about the Castellano program. She thought about what Dara had said, the version who dismantled 4 businesses, the version who texted at 11 o'clock, both at once. She thought about the fact that she was not afraid of either version. She thought about what that meant. "Damien," she said, and his name in her mouth was easier now than the first time, more settled, like a word that had found its correct place in the sentence. "What happens after the filing?" Hale challenges it. "We defend it." He paused. "It takes time, it takes resources. It creates pressure on the foundation, on you specifically." "I can handle pressure, I know." He looked at her directly. "I also know that you have handled it alone for long enough that you've forgotten it's possible to handle it any other way." He paused. "You don't have to." She felt the full weight of those 4 words. She felt them in the way she'd felt the cold of the window glass the night of the meeting, real and present and arriving at exactly the moment she was out of performance and had no prepared answer. "This is unfamiliar territory," she said honestly. "I know," he said. "I'm not sure I'm good at it." "You climbed 27 floors on a sprained ankle rather than ask for a key," he said. "You are many things, Lena Carter. Not good at things is not among them." She almost smiled. Then her phone buzzed on the desk. She looked at it. A text from a number she didn't recognize. No name, 4 words. "Back off the Whitmore claim." Then a second later, a second message. "Your mother's building has a parking garage, floor B2. Think about it." The room tilted, not literally. She did not move. But something in the space between her heartbeat and the next one shifted in a way that was physical and total, and stripped every carefully managed layer of composure from the past 4 days down to the single bare fact underneath it all. They knew about her mother. Damien watched her face change. He said nothing. He reached across the desk and turned the phone so he could read the screen. She watched him read it. She watched his expression do the thing she had not yet seen it, do go absolutely, completely, chillingly still. Not the stillness of calculation, the stillness of a man deciding something. He set the phone back down. He looked at her. "Pack what you need for a few days," he said. "You're not staying here tonight. My mother is being moved to a safe location in the next 2 hours." He was already on his phone. "She will be comfortable. Her aide will be with her. You have my word, Damien Lena. He said her name the way he said everything directly, without performance. But underneath it, something she had not heard from him before. Something that was not quite anger and was not quite fear, and was what lived precisely between the two when the thing that caused it was something that mattered. Someone just told you they know where your mother sleeps. We are past the part of this where I ask permission. She looked at him. She thought about her mother in her chair, with the bright-eyed clarity of a good day, holding her hand. Be careful, she picked up her bag. Okay, she said. And for the first time in longer than she could measure, Lena Carter let someone else drive. The car moved through the city, and Lena sat in the passenger seat and did not speak for 4 minutes. She knew it was 4 minutes because she counted again. The way she always counted when she needed something to hold onto that wasn't feeling. 1, 2, 3, 4, each number a small container that held the next breath. Her mother's building, floor B2, think about it. Someone had watched. Someone had documented. Someone had decided that the most efficient way to move Lena Carter was not through her foundation, not through her funding, not through the legal architecture of a trust amendment, but through a 67-year-old woman who sometimes forgot what year it was and called her daughter's name for 2 hours before sleeping. That was the calculation Victor Hale had made, and the coldness of it, the precise, deliberate coldness of choosing that particular leverage, told her something important. Something that lived underneath the fear and clarified it. This was not about the Whitmore property anymore. This was about making sure she understood her place. My mother hasn't left that building in 3 months, she said. Her voice came out steady. She was grateful for that. She has a routine. Disrupting it causes confusion episodes. It could set her back weeks. The woman we're sending has experience with memory care patients, Damien said. He was on his second phone call since they'd gotten in the car, conducting 2 conversations in parallel with the particular efficiency of a man for whom logistical complexity was a native language. He paused his other conversation to answer her. She knows how to maintain routine in a new space. Your mother will have her photographs, her chair, her television. It will feel as familiar as we can make it. She'll know it's not home. Yes, he didn't soften it. She will, and that will be hard. And it will still be safer than the alternative. She pressed her palm flat against her knee and looked out the window at the city going past, and made herself hold both of those things at once. The hardness of it and the necessity of it. Where are we going? She said. A building I own in the Meridian District, 12th floor, 2 units, full security. My team uses it when there are situations that require it. Does this qualify as a situation? Someone texted you about your mother's parking garage. His voice remained even. Yes, this qualifies. She turned to look at his profile. The clean, controlled lines of a face that had learned to give away very little. She had been studying that face for 4 days, in the way she studied everything that mattered piece by piece, building a picture. How many times has something like this happened to you? She said. A pause. Threats against someone I was trying to protect? He kept his eyes on the road. More than I'd like. What happened those times? Sometimes I was fast enough. Another pause. Sometimes I wasn't. She heard everything in that second pause. Who weren't you fast enough for? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, my younger brother Marco, 12 years ago. He said it. The way people said things they had said so many times internally that the words had been worn smooth. He was collateral. Someone made a point using him, a beat. I learned from that. I learned to move before the point gets made. Lena sat with that. 12 years. Long enough to build a system around it. Long enough to make the lesson into a reflex. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Then quieter. Just let me be fast enough this time. She turned back to the window. Okay, she said. That was the second time she'd said that to him. Each time it had cost her something. Each time the cost had been worth it. She was still deciding what that meant. The unit in the Meridian building was not what she'd expected. She had constructed, somewhere in the back of her mind, an image of what Damien Moretti's safe house looked like. Something austere and functional. Something that communicated security without comfort. What she walked into was a space that was quiet and warm, with bookshelves along one wall, and a kitchen that had actual food in it, and a window that looked out over a part of the city she had always found manageable, not the high gloss towers of the financial district, not the crowded noise of downtown, but the middle ground where things were old and a little worn and genuinely inhabited. She stood in the center of the living room, with her bag over her shoulder, and looked around. "You've stayed here," she said. "Sometimes," he said from behind her. "It feels like someone's home." It was. He moved to the kitchen. "Coffee or tea?" She set her bag down. "Whose?" "Mine." For a while, he filled the kettle. After the Castellano program collapsed, I didn't go back to the main property for about 4 months. I stayed here and tried to figure out where I'd gone wrong. She looked at him. "Did you figure it out?" "Yes." He set the kettle on. I'd trusted the wrong person and ignored the signs because the work felt important enough to justify it. I told myself that what we were building was bigger than any one person's loyalty. He paused. "That was arrogant. The work doesn't make people trustworthy. You still have to look at the people, and now you look at the people first." "I look at everything." He turned to face her. "The work and the people. You can't sacrifice one for the other." She thought about 247 families. She thought about the hours she had spent looking at files, and never enough time looking at the people adjacent to those files, the ones adjacent to her, the ones who were watching her, the ones who had decided she was a variable in their calculation. "I didn't look carefully enough at Hale," she said. "You didn't know to look." He poured the water. "There's a difference between not looking and not knowing what you're looking for." "Is there?" "Yes." He handed her the mug. "You look at your clients with extraordinary attention. You see things about them that they don't see about themselves. That's a skill, and it comes from practice and care." He paused. "You just haven't had to apply it to people who want to use you. Because most of the people in your world need something from you that is genuine." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "That's a generous reading of a significant blind spot." "It's an accurate reading." He looked at her directly. "Don't apologize for being the kind of person who extends good faith. Just learn to carry it alongside something harder." She looked at him for a moment. "Is that what you did? After Castellano?" "Yes." He sat at the counter across from her. "I became harder, more careful, more closed." He paused, and she heard the particular weight of what he was choosing to say next, the choosing itself visible in the brief silence before it. "And I got very good at protecting things, and very bad at building them." She understood that. She understood it in the way she understood things that were also true of herself, not completely, not in the same proportion, but in the same family of truth. "Until the pitch meeting," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Until you walked in on a sprained ankle and told Belfield's team you intended to stay until someone said yes." Something moved in his face. Not the 3mm shift. Something more. "I had been in that building for 4 years, watching people negotiate and perform and position. I had forgotten what it looked like when someone just meant it." The kitchen was quiet. Lena set down her mug. "Damien." She said his name and then paused, because what she wanted to say next required honesty that was specific and not armored, and she was still learning to do that in real time. "I need you to tell me something true." "All right. What happens if we file the intent notice and Hale escalates? If the threats become something more than texts?" He held her gaze. "Then I handle it. How? The way I handle things." He said it simply, without performance. "Not illegally, but thoroughly." She thought about what Dara had said. The things he goes after tend to be things that deserve to be gone after. She thought about 4 businesses dismantled, and a waterfront consortium blocked, and a man named Marco, and 12 years of building a system around a single failure of speed. "I believe you," she said. "I know. That doesn't entirely reassure me. I know that too," and the almost smile arrived, quiet and real. "You're a careful person. You should stay that way." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. "Dara," she answered. "The regulatory office just received a complaint," Dara said without preamble. "Anonymous, alleging financial mismanagement in our Q3 reporting cycle. They're requesting an audit review." There it was. Exactly as Damien had predicted. Move through official channels. Create noise. "How long until they want documentation?" she said. "They've already requested it. They want a response within 72 hours. She closed her eyes. One breath. "Pull everything," she said. "Every receipt, every transaction record, every bank statement going back 18 months. I want it organized and clean, and I want it done before tomorrow morning." "Lena, I know how long it takes. Start tonight." She paused. "Dara, the complaint is retaliation. Our books are clean, and we're going to prove it so thoroughly that whoever filed this is going to regret the paperwork." She stopped. "Can you do that?" "A beat. I already started," Dara said. "I just wanted you to know." "Of course you did." And for a moment, in the middle of everything, Lena felt the specific warmth of being known by someone. "Thank you." She hung up. She looked at Damien. "The audit complaint," he said. "Filed within 2 hours of our meeting with Hale. He moves fast, so do we." She pulled her laptop from her bag. "I need to work." He stood and moved to the other side of the counter, giving her space without being asked, understanding without explanation the difference between presence and intrusion. She noticed that. She filed it in the category she had been building for 4 days. The one that had started as a single entry noticed the ankle and had grown, quietly and steadily, into something more complex and harder to categorize. She opened her files. She worked. He made food. At some point she was not paying attention to the time, but a plate appeared beside her laptop and she ate without stopping, and it was real food, actual food, the kind that took effort. And she did not know what to do with that, so she simply kept working and said thank you without looking up and heard him say, "You're welcome," in the tone of someone who found the whole transaction unremarkable. At 11:30 p.m. her phone rang, unknown number. She looked at Damien. He nodded slightly. She answered. "Miss Carter." The voice was female, older, careful in the way of someone who had rehearsed the call. "My name is Claire Saunderson." Lena went completely still. "Miss Saunderson," she said, "I know it's late, I'm sorry." A pause. "I've been watching what's happened today. The meeting. The complaint. I know Victor's playbook. I know exactly what he does when he decides someone is a problem." Another pause, and in it Lena heard the quality of a person carrying something heavy for a long time, reaching the point where setting it down was the only option left. "I have documentation that goes beyond what I was able to pass along through other channels. Internal communications. An email chain between Hale and 2 trust administrators. A memo that makes clear the amendment was specifically designed to eliminate competition for the Whitmore claim." Lena's hand tightened on the phone. "Miss Saunderson, your non-disclosure agreement does not apply to evidence of fraud," Claire Saunderson said. "I had an attorney review it 6 months ago. If what Hale did constitutes deceptive manipulation of a public trust instrument, and my attorney believes it does, the NDA is unenforceable." A pause. "I've been waiting for someone to file, someone worth giving this to." Another pause. "You're filing, aren't you?" "Yes," Lena said. "We are." The breath on the other end of the line was audible and brief, and carried inside it the sound of a decision finally executed. "Then I want to help," Claire Saunderson said. "I should have done this sooner. I took the settlement because I was scared, and I had student loans, and I told myself the truth would come out eventually without me." Her voice was steady, but the steadiness cost something. "The truth doesn't come out by itself. I know that now." Lena looked at Damien across the room. He was watching her face. She turned back to the call. "Miss Saunderson, I need to ask you something directly." "Go ahead. The documentation you have. Is it complete? Is it original? And are you prepared to stand behind it with your name attached?" A pause. "Yes to all 3, Claire said. "Then I need you to contact an attorney named Ruth Adler first thing tomorrow morning." She gave the number from memory. "Don't go through email. Call directly. Tell her what you told me, and tell her you're ready to make a formal statement." "All right." A pause. "Miss Carter, I'm sorry it took me this long." "You're here now," Lena said. "That's what matters." She hung up. The room was absolutely quiet. Then Damien said, "Claire Saunderson. She has internal documentation, email chains." He was quiet for a moment. "That had a specific texture, the texture of pieces arriving in the right order." "That changes the shape of this," he said. "Yes." She set the phone down on the counter, very deliberately. "It means Hale didn't just manipulate a trust amendment. He did it knowing inside his organization could document it. Which means he believed his NDA was airtight. Which means he's done this before," Damien said, "and gotten away with it. And he'll do it again if we don't make this stick." She looked at her laptop, at the compliance files, at everything she had been building for 3 years in a 2-room office with second-hand furniture and a printer held together by tape and collective optimism. "This is bigger than the Whitmore property now," she said. "Yes," he said, "and Hale is going to escalate again when he realizes Claire has come forward." "Yes." She looked at him. "Then we move first," she said. Something shifted in his expression that she recognized now, not just the 3 millimeters, but the fuller version beneath it. The version that appeared when something she said or did landed in a place that was real rather than performed. "Ruth Adler gets Claire's documentation," he said. "James Wu prepares the response to the audit complaint. And tomorrow morning, before Hale has time to regroup, we file the intent notice." 18 days before the deadline. Yes. Is that fast enough to matter? Filing publicly before he expects it? Yes. He paused. It changes the story. Right now, Hale is operating in the margin. The moment your intent notice is public record, his options narrow significantly. Another pause. He cannot intimidate a public filing out of existence. She thought about that. She thought about the text message. Floor B2. Think about it. She thought about a man who had made that calculation, who had looked at everything she was and everything she protected and chosen the most specific, most personal point of pressure. She felt something she had been carefully managing since she read that message finally settle into its correct form. Not fear anymore. Something cleaner and harder and with better edges. What time does Ruth start tomorrow? She said. 6 a.m. Call her tonight. Tell her Claire Saunderson will contact her at 6:01. He picked up his phone. He made the call. While he was on the phone, Lena opened a new document and began drafting the formal letter she would send to Marcus Belfield. In the morning, not about the audit complaint, not about the Foundation's defense, but about the Whitmore property. Straightforward. Clear. The actuarial breakdown he'd asked for, attached, with a single paragraph noting that the Whitfield Foundation would be filing a community benefit intent claim on the Whitmore District parcel within 24 hours, and that any investment partner of the Foundation could expect to be associated with whatever story that fling told about what the property was ultimately used for. She was not threatening Belfield. She was giving him information. The same way she always gave people information clearly, specifically, and with enough detail that they could make a real decision. She finished the letter at 12:47 a.m. She looked up from her laptop. Damien was sitting across the room, not working, not on his phone, just sitting, in the particular alert stillness she had come to recognize as his default present without demanding anything from the presence. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you. I don't sleep much." "Neither do I." He looked at her. "What keeps you up?" he said. It was a real question. The kind he asked without social padding, without the polite implication that the answer was optional. She thought about it honestly. "The ones I can't reach," she said. "The cases that stall. The family that stops returning calls, and I don't know if that means they're okay, or if it means they fell through and I missed it." She paused. "The math. There are always more people than there is capacity. You close one gap and two more open." She looked at her laptop. "I lie awake running scenarios for how to stretch the numbers one more time." He was quiet. "And you," she said. "The ones I got wrong," he said. "The decisions that seemed correct and turned out to cost something I couldn't pay back." A pause. "Marco, the Castellano families." He paused again. "You get faster at carrying it. You don't get lighter." She understood that. "Damien." She said his name, and he looked at her. "After this is over, the filing, the audit, whatever Hale does next and whatever comes after that." She stopped. "What do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you came to that meeting because someone sent you an anonymous tip. You stepped into something that wasn't your situation. You've spent a week managing logistics and legal retainers and safe houses for a woman you met 4 days ago." She held his gaze. "I want to know what you actually want, not what you're protecting. Not what you're managing." A pause. "What you want." The room was very quiet. Something moved across Damien Moretti's face that she had not seen there before. Not the controlled adjustments of a man navigating information. Not the contained, 3mm shift of something that almost became an expression. Something that arrived fully and stayed. "The thing I built in 2019, he said. "The Castellano program. What it was supposed to be before someone hollowed it out." He paused. "I want to build it again, the right way, with the right people." He paused once more. "I want to build it alongside someone who knows why it matters from the inside." She heard everything inside that sentence. She heard the specifically shaped space at the end of it. She did not look away. "That's a long-term project," she said carefully.
"Yes,"
he said.
"it is. It requires trust."
"I'm still learning to trust people, Damien. I'm not fast at it." "I'm not asking for fast," he said. "I've been patient for 4 years. I can be patient a while longer." She looked at him. She thought about the woman she had been 6 days ago, sitting in her car in a parking garage for 11 minutes, unable to get out, managing everything alone, filing everything under later, climbing 27 floors rather than asking for a key. She thought about the fact that the woman who would have done all of that, who would have found Damien Moretti's involvement dangerous and his attention unsettling, and his knowledge of her attorney's name alarming. That woman was still here. Was still her. Was still the one running the foundation and drafting the letters and counting through the fear. She had just stopped doing it entirely alone, and the difference, she was discovering, was not in what she was able to carry. It was in what she didn't have to pretend she wasn't carrying. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from Dara, books are clean. 18 months of documentation organized and indexed. Ready to submit. Then 1 minute later, from Ruth Adler, reviewing. Your compliance record is airtight. Audit complaint will not survive contact with your actual documentation. Then, 10 seconds after that, from a number she recognized now as one of Damien's team, Mrs. Carter's mother is settled, comfortable, asking for her puzzle book. Adie'd retrieved it from the apartment. Lena stared at that last message for a long moment. Her mother was asking for her puzzle book, which meant her mother was calm enough to want it, which meant someone had paid enough attention to know that was the thing to bring. She set the phone down. She looked at Damien. Someone got my mother's puzzle book, she said. The blue one, he said, with the cardinals on the cover. Your aide mentioned she asks for it on difficult evenings. Lena pressed her lips together. She breathed. She did not cry, because she was not the kind of person who cried easily, but she felt the thing behind, crying, the full, specific pressure of being known by someone who was paying attention, that arrived not with fanfare but with a puzzle book, with cardinals on the cover retrieved from an apartment at midnight. Damien, yes, thank you. She said it the same way she'd said it before without armor. But this time it was different. This time it was not gratitude for logistics or strategy or resources. This time it was gratitude for the blue puzzle book. He looked at her for a moment. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we file. She closed her laptop. She stood. She looked at him one more time, the man at the end of the table, who had noticed her ankle, who had asked how long she'd been walking like that, who had listened to 40 minutes of foundation mechanics and texted her at 11 o'clock at night and moved her mother to safety and retrieved the Cardinals' puzzle book and said, I can be patient a while longer. Good night, Damien, she said. Good night, Lena. She walked to the door of the bedroom. She stopped. For what it's worth, she said without turning around. I think what you built in 2019 was worth building. And I think the person who believed in it enough to spend 8 months on it, I think that person is still here. She heard him go quiet, a different quiet than the others. Good night, she said again. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and listened to the city outside the window, ordinary and indifferent and continuing, and she thought about tomorrow, about Ruth Adler, and the filing, and whatever Victor Hale would do when he understood that the woman he had sent a threatening text message to had not in fact backed down. She thought about what she had said to Hale directly, across her second-hand desk in her 2-room office. I always know what I'm doing. She thought about the fact that for the first time in a very long time, that felt completely true. Not because nothing was uncertain, because she was not facing the uncertainty alone. She lay back. She closed her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could accurately remember, she slept. The intent notice was filed at 6:47 a.m. Ruth Adler submitted it electronically to the Municipal Trust Registry, copied to the city's nonprofit compliance office, the Community Development Board, and 3 members of the Infrastructure Oversight Committee, whose names Damien had provided the night before without explanation and without being asked. Lena was sitting at the kitchen counter with her second cup of tea when her phone showed the confirmation timestamp. She stared at the number for a moment. 6:47 a.m. 18 days before the deadline Victor Hale had manufactured in a trust amendment he had believed was airtight. She set the phone down. She breathed. She had expected to feel something large, relief or triumph, or the particular catharsis that came after a long fight reached a turning point. What she felt instead was smaller and more durable than any of those things. It was the feeling of something correct being done, of a piece placed where it belonged. Not the end of anything, because she understood now that this was not the kind of story that ended cleanly at a single moment, but the feeling of footing, of ground beneath her feet after days of navigating ice. Damien came in from the other room. He looked at her face. Done, he said. Done, she said. He poured himself coffee. He stood on the other side of the counter and looked at his own phone for a moment, and then set it fist down, which she had learned meant the information had been received and processed, and the next move was someone else's for the moment. Hale will know within the hour, he said. I know. His attorneys will begin reviewing options immediately. I know that too. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Ruth says, the documentation from Claire Saunderson changes the legal terrain significantly. That even if Hale challenges the filing, the internal communications she's provided make any challenge a public relations problem, as much as a legal one. His attorneys know that. Damien paused, which is why his next move will not be legal. She looked at him. What do you think he does? She said. He looks for the weakest point in the structure and applies pressure there. He paused. Not you. He tried you directly and it didn't work. Not the legal filing that's public record and challenging it creates exposure. He looked at her steadily. He goes after the people around you. She thought of Dara immediately. Then of James Wu. Then of Ruth Adler, who had entered this situation voluntarily and with full knowledge, but who was still, by the simple fact of her involvement, now in the radius of whatever Victor Hale decided to do next. I need to warn them, she said. Already done. He met her eyes. Last night, while you were sleeping, each of them received a call from my security team, explaining the situation and the precautions in place. He paused. Dara said, and I'm quoting directly, tell Mr. Moretti I figured this out 2 days ago and I already changed my passwords. Lena almost laughed. It arrived the same way it had on the phone call days earlier, unexpectedly, genuinely, from a place that had not been accessed in a while. She pressed her hand over her mouth and felt the laugh settle into something warmer. That sounds exactly like her, she said. She also said to tell you that Ellis Torres called the office yesterday morning. Damien's voice shifted slightly. Careful in a new way. He heard about the Whitmore filing through someone in the community board network. He wants to know if the community center, the property deed, specifies if it would serve the Whitmore district. Lena set her mug down. That's his neighborhood, she said quietly. Yes. His daughter Maya, she went to the community center on Whitmore Street when she was younger. Before it closed. I know, Damien said. And then after a pause, he also said to tell you something else. She looked at him. He said to tell you, she said yes. Lena didn't move for a moment. Maya, she said. The engineering program at Hargrove Tech. Damien's voice was even, but she heard what lived underneath it. She was accepted to their junior pathway, full scholarship. A pause. Ellis said she found out yesterday morning. Lena pressed both hands flat on the counter. She looked at the surface of the counter and felt something move through her chest that was not manageable in the usual way, that did not fit into the category of later, or the file labeled things I cannot afford to feel right now. It arrived fully and completely, and she let it. Maya Torres, 14 years old, daughter of a man who used to sit across her kitchen table and apologize for taking up time. Daughter of a man who had come through the Castellano program's collapse and found his way to Whitfield and spent 2 years rebuilding a life. Daughter of a man who was going to watch his daughter become an engineer. She's going to be an engineer, Lena said. Yes, Damien said. She is. Lena looked up at him. And whatever she had been managing, whatever careful architecture of professional distance and earned wariness she had been maintaining around her response to this man, she felt it shift. Not collapse. It didn't collapse, because Lena Carter did not operate in collapses. But it shifted, the way a door shifts when someone finally turns the handle. Thank you, she said, for telling me that. He wanted you to know, Damien said. So did I. Victor Hale's response came at 9:15 a.m. Not a legal filing, not a direct call, a press release. Issued through a public relations firm connected to 3 of his city council allies, citing anonymous concerns from community stakeholders about the Whitfield Foundation's management practices, specifically referencing the regulatory audit complaint and suggesting that the Foundation's sudden claim to the Whitmore property all represented opportunistic overreach by an organization whose financial accountability remained under review. Lena read it on her phone. She read it a second time. She set the phone face down on the counter the way Damien set his phone down. Information received. Processed, next move being assembled. He went public, she said. Yes. With language designed to make the audit complaint and the Whitmore filing look like they're part of the same story. Like the filing is suspicious because of the audit. The audit he triggered, Damien said, which the press release doesn't mention. No, she stood up. She picked up her phone and called Dara. Dara answered on the first ring with, I've already seen it. How bad is the reach? 3 local news sites have picked up the release. City Desk at the Tribune is calling for comment. 2 nonprofit watchdog blogs are running it. A pause. It's not catastrophic. but it's designed to look like smoke even though there's no fire, and smoke is enough to make funders nervous. Call Marcus Belfield's office, Lena said, not his assistant. His direct line. Tell him Lena Carter is requesting 5 minutes. He'll want to know what it's about. Tell him it's about the difference between a press release and a public record. A beat. Got it, Dara said. She hung up. She looked at Damien. I need to make a statement. Public. Today. Before this press release finishes the news cycle. Agreed. Not through a PR firm. Not through a prepared document. She was already thinking. Direct, in my own voice. Video posted to the Foundation's platform. Everything Ruth cleared us to say about the filing, about the trust amendment, about the timeline. She paused. Claire Saunderson, has she given permission to be named? Ruth confirmed this morning. She's ready to go on record. Then I name her. I name the amendment. I name the dates. I give people the actual story, and I let the actual story compete with the press release. Damien was quiet for a moment. That puts you directly in front of this, he said. Yes, she looked at him steadily. I know. I'm choosing to be there. Something in his face. The fuller version again, the one she had stopped trying to catalog, because it happened when something was real, and the realness of it was its own category. All right, he said. I know someone at the Tribune. Not to kill the story, to make sure the full context is available when they run it. I don't want special access, she said immediately. It's not special access. It's making sure the journalist covering this story has read the public trust records before they publish, rather than after. He paused. That's information, not influence. She looked at him for a moment. There's a line, she said. I know where it is, he said. I'm not crossing it. She held his gaze another beat. Then she nodded. She called James Wu. She called Ruth Adler. She spent 40 minutes on back-to-back calls assembling the exact perimeter of what could be said publicly, what was protected by ongoing legal process, what was on record and what was not yet. When she was done, she sat down at the counter with a notepad and wrote the statement by hand, the way she wrote everything that mattered, first draft by hand, then typed, then spoken aloud to find the places where the rhythm was wrong. She wrote for 25 minutes without stopping. Then she read it back. It was 4 minutes long. It was specific. It named dates and documents and a woman named Claire Saunderson, who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it with her job. It explained the community benefit clause, and the trust amendment, and the manufactured deadline. It said the Whitfield Foundation's books were clean, and the documentation was available to any credentialed journalist or regulatory authority who requested it. And at the end, in the final 30 seconds, it said something that was not legal language and not institutional language, and not the language of a nonprofit defending itself against a bad faith complaint. It said, I started this foundation because Raymond Hollis couldn't lift a coffee pot, and nobody was making phone calls on his behalf. That is still why I do this. That has not changed. And I will not pretend, for anyone's convenience, that the people in our program are less important than a parcel of land that a developer wants to build on. They are not. They are more important. They are the whole point. She read that last paragraph to Damien. He was quiet for a moment. Leave it exactly as it is, he said. She posted the video at 11:42 a.m. By 2 p.m. it had been shared 400 times. By 4 p.m. 1100. Marcus Belfield called at 3:15 p.m., not his assistant. His direct line, the one Dara had requested, Miss Carter. His voice carried the particular quality of a man recalibrating rapidly. I've reviewed the public trust records, as you suggested in your letter this morning. I've also watched your statement. Thank you for taking the time, she said. I want to be direct with you. A pause. Belfield Capital has no interest in being associated with the suppression of a legitimate community benefit claim. The manner in which that trust amendment was filed was not something we were aware of, or would have supported. I understand. We'd like to continue discussing the funding partnership. Separate from the Whitmore question, though I'll say clearly for the record that we have no objection to the Foundation's filing. Another pause. I would also like the name of the journalist you spoke with at the Tribune, because I have some additional context about Victor Hale's development practices that I think the public interest would benefit from. Lena looked at Damien across the room. He raised an eyebrow. She almost smiled. I'll have someone follow up with you by end of day, Mr. Belfield, she said. She hung up. Belfield is going on record, she said. Damien set down his coffee. About what specifically? He said he has context about Hale's development practices. He wants the journalist's name. She paused. Which means Hale has done this before. Which means Belfield knows about it. Which means Belfield has been waiting for someone to open this door. Damien looked at her for a long moment. 3 years ago, he said slowly, there was a community land trust in the Harbor District. Similar structure. A qualifying nonprofit lost its window to file a claim by 48 hours. The property went to a Hale Development subsidiary. He paused. I always thought the timing was wrong. Too precise. Same playbook, Lena said. Same playbook, he confirmed. And Belfield was part of the investment consortium that reviewed that project afterward. He paused. He knew something was off and he didn't push it. Until now, she said. Until you made it impossible to stay quiet, look better than speaking. She thought about that. About the way a single filing, a single documented, legitimate, public action could change the calculus for everyone adjacent to it. About how much of the power that men like Victor Hale wielded came not from actual strength, but from the shared decision of people around them to find silence more convenient than truth. About what happened when one person decided silence was not an option. Dara needs to know about the Harbor District Trust, she said. If there's a pattern, Ruth needs it for the formal challenge. I'll have the documents sent to Ruth's office within the hour. She looked at him. You have those documents. I've been collecting them for 3 years, he said simply. I just didn't have a reason to do anything with them until someone walked into a room on a sprained ankle and changed the shape of the situation. She stared at him. You've been building a case against Hale, she said. Before the anonymous tip. Before the meeting. I've been holding information, he said carefully. There's a difference. Information without the right context is just weight. He paused. You provided the context. She sat with that for a moment. The pieces assembling themselves the way they had been assembling, since the night of the meeting, each one arriving not as surprise but as confirmation. Building toward a picture she was finally close enough to see whole. The anonymous tip wasn't about protecting my foundation, she said slowly. Not only. Claire Saunderson sent it, because she knew you were the person who had been collecting information on Hale. She knew that if someone finally filed, if there was a legitimate claim to anchor everything to you, would have the material to make it mean something. Damien looked at her. Yes, he said. She connected us deliberately. Yes, she knew about the Castellano program. She knew what Hale had done to it. She knew you had been. Lena stopped. She knew you had been waiting for the right moment. And the right person, he said. The room was very quiet. Lena looked at the man across the counter from her, the man who had sat at the end of a table and watched her walk across a room, and asked how long she had been walking like that. Who had spent 3 years carrying documents about Victor Hale the way she spent years carrying case files. Who had, in his own way, been doing exactly what she did, not letting go of the people who had been failed, not filing it under later, not deciding that the weight was too much to keep carrying. Just carrying it, until someone made it possible to set it down in the right place. Damien, she said. Yes. Why didn't you tell me all of this at the beginning? He held her gaze. Because at the beginning you didn't know me, he said. And you were right not to, he paused. Trust is not something I expect quickly. It's something I try to earn correctly. Another pause, and she heard the particular weight of the next sentence before it arrived. I wanted you to make your own decisions. About the filing. About Hale. About all of it. With information, not with my agenda. Even when your agenda was to protect me. Even then. He looked at her directly. Protection without respect is just another cage. I have spent enough of my life in cages of various kinds to know I won't build one for someone else. She felt those words land the way specific truths landed fully, without softening, in the place they were meant to reach. She stood up from the counter. She walked around it. She stood in front of him close, the kind of close that was a choice, that said something without requiring words, and she looked at him the way she had been looking at him since the night of the meeting, fully, without the careful management of what her face was doing. I want to show you something, she said. She picked up her phone. She opened her photos. She found the one she was looking for and turned the screen toward him. It was a photograph. A man in his late 40s standing at a birthday party, holding an infant, grinning at the camera with the specific, complete, unguarded joy of someone who had been told they might not have this, and then found themselves here anyway. Raymond Hollis. This is why, she said. This is the whole thing. This photograph. Damien looked at it for a long moment. He looks like a man who got his life back, he said. He did. She put the phone down, and there are 246 more where he came from. And if the Whitmore Community Center opens, if we can run the expanded program from a real space, with real capacity, without fighting for every resource. She stopped. There will be thousands more. He looked at her. I know, he said. That's what the Castellano program was supposed to be, she said. Yes, we can build it right this time. He was quiet for a moment. The fullest quiet she had heard from him, not the quiet of calculation or of control, but the quiet of someone allowing themselves to want something. Yes, he said, we can. The formal challenge to the Whitfield Foundation's intent notice was filed by Hale Development Group's attorneys at 4:30 p.m. the same day. Ruth Adler received it, read it, and called Lena at 4:47 p.m. It's thin, Ruth said. They're arguing procedural deficiency in the filing format. Specifically, they're claiming your nonprofit's most recent annual report wasn't filed in the correct district office before the claim. A pause. It was. I have the timestamp. Filed 11 months ago, correct office, correct format. Their argument lasts approximately 45 minutes in front of a judge. How long until it's in front of a judge? Lena said. Emergency review given the trust timeline. I've already requested it. We should have a hearing date within 72 hours. Ruth paused. Miss Carter, this challenge is not a serious legal maneuver. It's a delay tactic. They're hoping the hearing falls close enough to the trust expiration that any complication becomes catastrophic. How close would it fall? 7 to 10 days before expiration at current pace. Another pause, which is tight, but manageable if nothing else goes wrong. Something in the phrasing made Lena's attention sharpen. If nothing else goes wrong, she said. What else could go wrong? The audit complaint is still open with the regulatory office. If they escalate from review to formal investigation before our hearing, it creates a cloud over the filing that opposing counsel will exploit. Ruth's voice was steady and professional. I don't think they'll escalate. Your documentation is genuinely immaculate, and whoever organized your compliance files deserves a significant raise. That's Dara, Lena said. Give Dara the raise, but the regulatory timeline is the one variable I can't fully control. She paused. Is there anything on Hale's side that changes the regulatory office's calculus? Something that makes the anonymous complaint look like what it is. Lena thought about Marcus Belfield and his context about Hale's development practices. She thought about the Harbor District Trust and 3 years of documents in Damien's possession. She thought about Claire Saunderson, who had signed a statement that morning and sent it to Ruth's office and was now sitting somewhere in this city, carrying the specific relief of a person who has finally done the thing they should have done sooner. Yes, Lena said. Several things. How quickly do you need them? Yesterday, Ruth said. By tonight, Lena said. I promise. She hung up. She turned to Damien. The Harbor District documents, she said. The full file. I need it sent to Ruth and to the regulatory office, simultaneously, with a cover letter establishing the pattern. Hale using trust amendment manipulation to eliminate nonprofit competition is not a single incident, it's a practice. The regulatory office needs to see that before they decide whether to escalate the audit complaint. Damien was already on his phone. Done, he said. My attorney will package it with a formal statement about the Castellano program. The paper trail goes back further than the Harbor District. He paused. There's also a third instance, a vocational training nonprofit in the Eastern Corridor, 2020. Same mechanism. They missed their window by 6 days. Lena closed her eyes for 1 second. 3 foundations. 3 manufactured deadlines. 3 communities that didn't get what they'd been promised because one man had decided the law was something to be navigated around rather than followed. Send everything, she said. Everything is going, he said. The hearing was scheduled for 9 days before the trust expiration. In the 72 hours between the filing and the hearing date, several things happened in rapid succession. The Tribune ran a full investigative piece, not the press release, not the statement, but an actual investigation that included interviews with Claire Saunderson, documentary evidence of the trust amendments filing process, and background on the Harbor District case and the Eastern Corridor nonprofit. Marcus Belfield gave an on-record quote describing the Whitmore Amendment process as inconsistent with transparent community investment practice, which was the most carefully worded thing Lena had ever read, and was also, she understood, genuinely courageous for a man in his position. The regulatory office contacted James Wu at 8 a.m. the morning after the Tribune piece ran. They were closing the audit review. The complaint had been assessed as unsubstantiated. Lena's documentation was accepted, no further review required. Dara called her with that news, and then went completely silent for 4 seconds on the phone, which was the longest silence Dara Okafor had produced in 3 years of working together. "It's over," Dara said. "The audit is over," Lena said. "The hearing is still ahead, but the audit is over." "Yes." Another 4-second silence. "I'm going to get a very large coffee," Dara said. "And then I'm coming in, and I'm going to reorganize the compliance files, because they have been through a lot this week." Dara: "Yes, thank you for everything. The past week you have been—" "Stop," Dara said, not unkindly. "You can thank me after the hearing. I don't want premature gratitude. It makes me nervous." Lena smiled, a full one. After the hearing, she agreed. The hearing lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. Ruth Adler was, as Lena had suspected she would be, extraordinary. She presented the filing documentation with the precision of someone who had spent 20 years in this exact arena and retained, despite all of it, the specific righteous anger of a person who found procedural manipulation personally offensive. Hale's attorneys raised their argument about the annual report filing format. Ruth produced the timestamp, the confirmation receipt, and a citation from the district office's own processing records, showing the document had been accepted without issue 11 months prior. The opposing attorney tried twice more on variations of the same argument. Both times Ruth had the answer before the sentence finished. At 2:23 p.m. the judge issued his ruling. The challenge was denied. The Whitfield Foundation's intent notice was valid. The community benefit claim on the Whitmore parcel would proceed to the trust administrator for formal review, with the foundation's eligibility confirmed as meeting all deed requirements. Lena sat at the plaintiff's table and heard the ruling and felt the ground beneath her feet, again solid, real earned. Ruth shook her hand across the table and said, in a voice that contained multitudes, "File that raise for Dara." Lena laughed. Outside the courthouse, her phone rang before she reached the bottom of the steps. She looked at the screen. "Damien." "I heard," he said when she answered. "Just now, I was watching the docket in real time." A pause. Ruth was excellent. Ruth was extraordinary. She stood on the courthouse steps with the city spread out around her, ordinary and indifferent and continuing, the way it always was, the way it had been through every piece of the past 10 days. "It's done. The hearing is done," he said. "The trust review takes another 60 days. And Hale may still Damien." She said his name and he stopped. "Let me have this for 1 minute." A pause. "Yes," he said. "All right." She stood there for that minute. She stood on the steps and she let the winning be what it was, not complete, not the end, not without further complications ahead, but real, solid, a thing that had been done correctly and could not be undone. Then she said, "Okay, what does Hale do next?" She heard that near smile, fully present now, no longer 3 millimeters, the full, real thing, arriving without management or performance. "He calls his attorneys," Damien said. "And his attorneys tell him that the regulatory complaint failed, the legal challenge failed, and the Tribune piece has made any further aggressive action against the Whitfield Foundation a matter of public record the moment it happens." A pause. "He calculates his losses, he accepts them, and he moves on to the next project. And the Whitmore property goes to trust review. With your filing and Claire's documentation and the pattern evidence, the administrator will confirm the community benefit claim. Construction timeline for the community center is approximately 14 months from formal approval." 14 months, she said. "Yes, Ellis Torres's daughter will be 16 when it opens." A pause. "She'll be an engineer by then," Damien said. Lena smiled at the city. "Come to the foundation office," she said. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, a beat." "Why?" he said. "Because I want to show you something." She paused. "The filing cabinets, the names, 247 of them, and growing. I want you to see what we built and what we're going to build." She paused again. "What we're going to build together." The silence on the line was the fullest one yet. 8 o'clock, he said. "Don't be late," she said. "I won't." She hung up. She stood on the steps. She thought about 10 days ago, a woman in a stairwell on the 21st floor, pressing the back of her hand against her mouth, whispering to herself, "Get up, Lena, please." She thought about the person who had climbed 27 floors rather than ask a concierge for a key, who had walked into a room and lied to the most dangerous man in the city, had said "I'm fine" and meant "I am barely standing," who had spent 3 years carrying 247 names, and a sick mother and a 2-room office and a printer held together by tape, and had filed every unbearable thing under later and kept moving because moving was the only version of the story she knew. That woman was still here. She was still every one of those things. She had not been rescued from any of it, but she had been seen inside all of it fully, without performance, by a man who had earned the right to her trust one decision at a time, who had never tried to take the weight from her, who had simply stood close enough that she knew she wouldn't fall alone. And that, she understood now, was not a small thing. It was not the same as being saved. It was better than being saved. It was being known. She walked down the steps. Her ankle barely registered. She had work to do. The city moved around her ordinary and indifferent, and full of Raymond Hollises and Ellis Torreses and Patricia Osis, who were sitting in kitchens somewhere right now, afraid, holding pieces of paper with referral numbers that no one had explained, waiting for someone to make a phone call on their behalf. Lena Carter walked into it, not because she had to, not because there was no alternative, but because she had always known, in the deepest and most unshakable part of herself, that this was what she was built for. And for the first time, walking down courthouse steps in the morning light, with her phone in her hand, and a community center 14 months from breaking ground, and a man who understood her meeting her at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and the names of 247 people who were going to be okay for the first time in longer than she could measure, she was not doing it to prove something. She was doing it because she chose to, because she was no longer apologizing for taking up space, because the woman who had whispered, "Sorry, I'm late," into a room full of powerful people had learned, finally and completely, that she was not late at all. She had arrived exactly when she was supposed to, and she was never going to apologize for that again.